I had heard the term code switching, around the time that I was discovering these different movement signatures of mine. And I thought, okay, this is super fascinating. Let me start doing some research about this. And code switching as a term really started with linguistics. So, speaking to people who are bilingual, multilingual, and curious about how do people know when to switch between their languages, often sometimes in the middle of a sentence, right? So a lot about external cues and how we know how to do that. And then the next kind of field to pick that up was biracial and multiracial psychology. And that got very interested in what they call, cognitive frame switching or frame switching within, psychological means. So starting to study what happens with folks that have different racial identities, and I would say cultural identities, as a broader context, in the brain, also within behaviors, right? So, and we could go down that road. It's fascinating, the research on what happens in the brain if you have, even just symbolic cues to switch. It doesn't have to be words. And someone who's bicultural, they will switch their worldviews according to their cultural identities, according to what those cues are bringing forward. So that was that other piece of research that I'm like, okay, this is super interesting. It also identified that being multiracial, biracial, psychologically can have both, wonderful skills and really difficult situations. So we've named some of them, which is compartmentalization, fragmentation. But you also can have things like higher sense of social attunement, social flexibility, a higher level of awareness for, intolerance for difference, those kind of things, right? So then that whole field starts talking about how do these things, work together if you want the identities to start, really be more congruent. Okay. So then I'm like, okay, great. This is wonderful. Someone must have talked about this in the body. Because I'm like, I know I feel it in the body. I know my movements change. My sense of personal distance changes. My posture changes. All that. That's got to exist out there. This was 2015. I was doing the research. At that time, I couldn't find any discussion about code switching from a somatic perspective and somatic research at all. So I started to kind of piece it together myself. And so I started with really the concept of what does it mean to be culturally embodied? Just even defining that. And at that time, I spoke about it in terms of nonverbal communication together with somatic awareness, right? Which are not quite the same things, but they're complementary. And then I wanted to capture the movement of it because we move between. That's what code switching is we're moving in between these different identities. And there is also an in-between space in those identities. So embodied code switching actually takes each of these identities within their culturally embodied ways and invites, a person to move in between them consciously and with awareness and noticing what happens as they go from one to the other and if they're in between. And touching into, and I have a loop called the SIA loop, sensation, interpretation, and action. So what am I sensing in my body? What do I feel? Interpretation, what meaning am I making from this? What are my thoughts and emotions? And then action, what do I do or not want to do, right? So as those three kind of inform you in those identities as you move, it really starts to shed some light in terms of like, oh, this is how I actually start to do the switch within myself. And you begin to get more conscious and proactive about it. So the loop is an infinity loop. So that's why I'm doing that with my ears. So that's the movement of it. Since then, in the book now, I've expanded cultural embodiment to add another layer of what I call awareness, 3 types of awareness, which is social awareness, emotional awareness, and environmental awareness.